Joining me now is the Israeli military spokesman, Major Doron Spielman. Major, thank you so much for joining us. In terms of the latest casualties, more than 700 people have been killed in Gaza in the past 24 hours. That is according to the health ministry in Gaza, which I know you say is controlled by Hamas. But then we have Save the Children, which is not controlled by Hamas. They say that at least 2,000 children have been killed in Israel strikes since the horrific Hamas attacks on October 7th. These are, I think you would admit, extraordinary figures. And your ground operation hasn't even started yet. So how do you look at those numbers, those lives lost, and say the IDF is doing everything it can to minimize civilian casualties?
So I think that we have to understand, first of all, the loss of the life of any child is something that is deeply painful. We know on the Israeli side and on the Gazan side. On the Israeli side, we still have children who very recently buried their parents and brothers. 22 of them are now orphans without families, including a few of them who are actually in Gaza and don't even realize they don't have families to go back to. Wherever a child, God forbid, is killed, it's an absolute enormous loss. What is common about the losses and the pain of all children in Israel and in Gaza is Hamas. Hamas planned for all of this the moment it attacked Israel. It was already counting the number of children that would be killed. We know this from the recordings that we recently confiscated and released to the general public. They were ordered to kill Israeli civilians, especially Israeli children. The same thing on the Gazan side. They know by putting children first in the line of fire, we're going to have international reports that are going to end up putting pressure on Israel. Again, all of these questions need to be addressed to Hamas. And it's one more example of the sickening brutality of this organization that finds the death of a child as a weapon to be able to be used against humanity.
But the question was, what is Israel doing to minimize those casualties? What are the efforts that the Israeli military is making?
Well, we know, and we've spoken about it many times, that Israel is doing as much as it can to move children out of the way. We have asked the residents of northern Gaza to move south. We strike only military targets. We send leaflets. We send messages. We do everything we can to get children out of the way. The challenge is you have a bully in the playground that every time you try to put somebody out of the way, pushes children right in the way. I mean, what kind of father, these terrorists, go underneath the ground and tell their wives and children to go to sleep in the buildings above them and warn them that they mustn't leave? That's only so one day we're going to report on CNN talking about dead children. This comes right out of Hamas's playbook. All of this discussion, as painful as it is, serves Hamas. We're doing what we can. The question is, and the light needs to shine on Hamas, once again, is a killer of children. Doesn't matter if it's Israeli children or their own children. They want to see dead children. They are a cult of hate, a cult of death.
The, there has been a refusal by Israel to consider a ceasefire. And so much of what we're hearing from Gaza is that it is impossible to move around because of the airstrikes continuing, not just in the north, but in the south as well. So if you are trying as hard as you can to avoid harming and killing civilians, why not consider a ceasefire until they can get to those safe zones that are being worked on?
Again, I'm not sure of the source of your information. I disagree with it. I think probably you're getting your information again from the health ministry or other organizations associated with Hamas in Gaza. We have already seen the movement of 700,000 at least people from Gaza that have moved from the north to southern Gaza. All the other people in the north are able to move to southern Gaza, except the ones that are being held at gunpoint by Hamas, which is in contravention of international law. Again, we are calling on the residents of northern Gaza to move south. We strike military targets. We do everything we can to avoid civilian casualties. Again, we need to put the responsibility on Hamas. Otherwise, we're serving their interests. That is what's the story here. Hamas is responsible for all of this.
Major, I just want you to clear something up for us on the aid front and the question of fuel. The military chief of staff, so the top military officer, said today that the IDF will be making sure that there is fuel in places where they need fuel to treat civilians. And I understand that obviously the point is getting fuel to civilians, not to Hamas. But that allowing for that fuel is different than the harder line that was taken by Mark Regev, who is an advisor to the prime minister. He said last night that the government's decision is not to allow fuel in at all. So can you explain whether any fuel will be allowed into Gaza?
Look, what I can tell you is that Hamas has been planning for this for months. There is in Gaza right now enough fuel to power all of Gaza and to power all of the power plants in Gaza. It is being held and hoarded by Hamas. Hamas is hoarding the actual fuel that it should be giving to its citizens because it's using it for terror. The problem with fuel is if fuel enters Gaza and ends up in the hands of Hamas, it's going to extend this campaign of terror. And as you said at the very beginning of this broadcast, the casualties of Hamas's terror are not only Israelis, they are children and people in Gaza. If we want this to stop, we have to defeat Hamas and not give them fuel that's going to fuel their terror. That's the challenge we face. We're judging it day by day. We're doing what we can with the international community, but we have to play the long game here and realize that fuel fuels Hamas and Hamas fuels this entire conflict.
So what I'm hearing is there is a possibility that fuel could be allowed in.
We're hoping, given the conditions, that fuel, food, everything that is needed for the residents of Gaza, that they will receive. In the southern area of Gaza, there is not a water shortage in the southern area of Gaza. There are aid trucks in the southern area of Gaza. In the north, the situation is very, very different, which is why, once
Right.
again, we're encouraging everybody to move south.
All right.